Hi, I'm Billy Keels, the host of the Going Long podcast. Every week, I'm going to be here interviewing the absolute best in the business as it relates to real asset investing, as well as real Main Street investors. We're going to be having conversations where you can listen in, and that's going to help you to continue on your path to education so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident in investing long distance. So make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you're liking it as well, because that way you can get every single episode as soon as it comes out. And by the way, don't forget to leave today's episode a 5-star review. Let's go ahead and listen to today's conversation. Welcome to the Going Long podcast, where we're back once again to continue to help to educate you so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. I'm your host, Billy Keels. And you know what? If you've ever wanted to know what steps to take to create your own micro empire, then guess what? This is absolutely the conversation that you're going to want to listen to until the very last word, I promise. Because today's guest at age 40, as a single mom, had no assets, no retirement account, and some would say no money. You know what? And it didn't just happen to her once, it happened to her twice. And I really want her to talk to us about how that happened. Because you know what? Afterwards, over the span of 4 years, with her W-2 job and a whole lot of grit, she was able to create over $1 million of income-producing investments that helped her to get on the right track. She's also the founder of Jennifer I. Grimson Investments, as well as the host of the super popular podcast, Micro Empires Podcast. Really happy to welcome to the show, Jennifer Grimson. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Billy.
I am super excited to be here. This is going to be such an amazing conversation. I'm already positive about that. So, listen, Jennifer, you know the deal here. I like to ask everybody, the same kind of 5 questions, and we're going to start with 2. We'll end with the other 3, but let's start with the first one. Where do you live in the United States?
I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which is, if you aren't familiar with the United States, it's a state in the south central area of the country. So it's still warm here. And I actually live in the east side, which if you've been to Nashville, you understand it. And it's a really cool town. So I've been here about 15 years, but that's where I am at this exact moment.
All right. Fantastic. Nashville. I've actually been here for just over 15 years as well. And yes, I can say Nashville is a pretty awesome town. I was there back in 1996, I think it was.
Oh, you need to come back. It's changed a lot.
Okay. All right. Well, I got it back there then. So listen, so that was kind of where you are. Help us understand, what is the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
You know, a lot of things have happened. I think at this time in our lives, I'm just so grateful for health and everything else. But we've stayed pretty locked down. But because Nashville's still warm, we were able to go out to dinner last night, sit outside, and have a dinner. And you know, I'm grateful for little things like that at this point, because that's not possible everywhere else. So got to see people, not be with people, but see them.
Oh, that's great. And I love the fact that you just helped to remind us, it's many times those little things, just being outside with loved ones and being able to have a nice dinner. So awesome. So listen, I've kind of told a little teeny tiny bit of your story, but everyone would love to know if you could give us, in your own words, a little bit more about your backstory. Maybe tell us about some of the things that you've done that helped you get to this point in your journey. And also, most importantly, like some of the different decisions that you've made along the way.
Yeah. So my story is that I lost everything twice. I usually just start off by saying that because that encapsulates it. And when I say I lost everything, I found myself with no money, no job, no car, no place to live, and 2 children who I was the sole financial responsibility for. The second time it happened, I realized, because I had corporate jobs. So the second time it happened, I realized that I needed to set up an environment, a life of what I call micro empires, like little tiny empires that belong to me. So if anything gave, I lost my job, or, you know, I had a bad breakup, or I made a bad investment, that there would be other things to fall back on. And so that's what I did over a period. I mean, it took a while to rebuild my credit. I also had been in Chapter 13 bankruptcy twice. But once I rebuilt the credit, it really was short time. In 4 years, I created $1.4 million in income producing investments. And I did that largely through real estate. And I just realized in that process that there were a lot of tools that were already at my disposal that I really wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware of how to manipulate those tools. So I created the podcast because I wanted to share that, but also I had kept that a secret. That was, I was very, very ashamed. And most people are. Most people who are making financial mistakes are very ashamed. And in the United States, most people are not financially secure. So I decided that I was going to share the story and just come right out and say what has happened. And what it has unlocked is, and what I'm creating is an environment where people can just be honest about where they are and where they can begin. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow. So I think that's a big concept, right? To feel comfortable about where you are, and have a safe place to be able to do that. I'm going to pick up on a couple of things that you just mentioned. You talked about people feeling ashamed, right? People feeling ashamed, and I'm just curious, like, kind of what do you believe is the reason that people feel ashamed, and what specifically do you think they're ashamed of?
Well, you do in your show, you ask a series of questions. In my show, I always open with one question. I always ask the guests, what is your money culture? What did you grow up in, your money culture? Because in the United States specifically, there's a national money culture. There's a culture that you grow up in. There's a culture that you have in your marriage. There's a culture of the town you live in or the city you live in. And there is a lot of pressure to have an appearance that you are better off than you are in the United States. And that therefore causes shame, because statistically, the average American cannot afford a $400 emergency. And much of that is a healthcare crisis, because unlike in Europe, we are strapped with how to deal with our own healthcare, and it's very expensive. But a $400 emergency. And now in this business that I'm creating, I talk to people about their money every day. And I talk to people that are in crisis, and I talk to people who are earning well over six figures and are in crisis because they spend as much as they make and more, because they had no financial literacy. We don't really teach it in schools here. So if you want to get financially literate, you really are on your own, probably after you get out of high school, to find that out. So I think that's where the shame comes from. And there's this pressure to have this attitude of, oh, I've got it all together and I have no worries. And just within a few questions, I'm usually able to find out that most people have either been in my situation or are close to being in that situation that I was in.
Oh, okay. So either having been there or being close to being there, and I'm sure that helps you to really make a connection with a lot of the different people that you're also helping and that you're also educating. You also said something interesting. Well, first, thanks for clarifying that, just in terms of the ashamed, because I think that's such a strong word, and you really help us to identify with that and part of that culture, whether it be at a macro level or at a micro level. Yeah. So one of the other things that you mentioned, you said that it's a tool to manipulate. I love that. Right. And I think sometimes if people hear you say manipulate a certain tool, they may not really understand, because I know what you mean by that. But if you can help to clarify, because I think it's such a powerful way to set yourself free or on the right path.
Right. Yeah. Manipulation can be a bad word, and it can be a really good word. So, and if I had to make a blanket statement, I would say to anybody listening to the show, the first thing I recommend to people is take a look at what you have right now. And if you can manipulate any of that or use it in a different way, because a lot of us don't do that. We decide we're going to go off and make a big investment and make money there, when there might be something you can do that you're already doing. So when I talk about manipulation, I mean, I didn't know that I could borrow against my 401k, which is a retirement savings, while I was working. I didn't know that I could purchase a home for 3% down as long as I moved into it. I didn't know that I could take an old 401k and turn it into a tool that allows me to invest in real estate. So those are just some of the tools. The 401k, as a corporate person here in the United States, I was like, oh yeah, I'm contributing to that, blah, blah, blah. I didn't really know much about it, didn't really understand much about it. Once I realized how it could be used to pay off debt or to buy houses, I bought 2 houses by borrowing against a 401k, paid off a car. You can pay off your student loans. You can do a lot of things. And there's no penalty or tax because I consider myself a pretty smart person, but I think, like many people in the corporate world, I believe my 401k was untouchable until I reached the age of 59. And if I did touch it in any way, that I would have to pay taxes and penalty. And that's just not true.
Yeah. And so, and also too, and this is just part of, doing the podcast thing. One of the things that you're sharing with us, and you gave us some really good, cool examples around the 401k and how you can also be able to tap into that to pay off different obligations that you may have. I want all of our listeners and our viewers to know that, like, one of the things, Jennifer's not sharing tax advice with you. She's just sharing her own experience. So what we're talking about now is you want to make sure that you look at what we're talking about and understand that with your specific tax advisors or whoever your advisors are, right? And so I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I just wanted to also make sure that everybody here that's watching and listening also knows that we're sharing stories to help you become much more informed. So, so you kind of already took part of it, because you talked about being able to, like, you didn't know about the 401k. And then once you found out about it, it really opened up this whole new universe of possibilities, which goes back to what we were talking about before, to be able to manipulate a particular tool, meaning that you get the most out of that specific tool when you learn about it, right?
Right.
How nervous were you when you found out that, hey, listen, you know what, I can actually tap into my 401k and actually do some things that don't feel right?
Well, one of the things about being flat broke and homeless twice does for you is it gives you the attitude of like, well, what have I got to lose, right? So the first thing that I had to do was initially it was to find a place to live, obviously. And I lived with my sister and then rented a place, but ultimately purchased a home. And did it the old fashioned way. I had terrible credit. So I purchased a home, had to put down a huge down payment, moved into my home. Realized that everything, when I talk about manipulation, everything has to have more than one job. So I felt that my home had to do more than just provide shelter. So I started renting out to friends, and then I discovered Airbnb, and that was a real game changer. But which is funny, because when you talk about nervousness, I discovered Airbnb in 2014. And when I was telling people about it, they're like, what do you mean you're going to let people sleep on your couch? And I said, what I mean is that in 6 nights, I could pay my mortgage. That's what I mean. So I didn't care. And I just started couch surfing, at friends' houses. So I had like nothing to lose. I was willing to try anything. When I discovered the 401k avenue, and I had an old 401k, which is really how I got started initially, but I was also still working a job. So I was contributing heavily to that. I had done my due diligence. So part of the reason I call the show Micro Empires is I encourage people. I'm not a big risk taker. So I encourage people to take micro risks, to take little steps. So I spent a lot of time getting to know people, interviewing people who specialize in it, interview people who know, had done it before I took the leap. And the first thing I did was I borrowed to pay off a car. And then I borrowed again to buy a house. And it was like for 3% down. And it was just a no-brainer. It just made complete sense. So I really wasn't that nervous. And then when I moved, the bigger old 401k was $150,000. That's also something that I do on my shows. I share all the numbers because a lot of the real estate shows or the things that I've seen, they're kind of very vague. So I like to let people where I was. So I moved $150,000 into a self-directed IRA. But it was just sitting there anyway. It's not like it was outperforming on the stock market, and you can still move it in there and invest in the stock market. You don't have to put it into real estate. But I purchased stock in a company that allows me to travel the world in luxury. That was number one. It doesn't pay me, but it pays me in travel. And then the other was I made an investment. Actually, that investment is in land, which we are going to liquidate and probably put back into multifamily or storage.
So, and there's a number of different areas that you can go into, right? Multifamily, storage, you can land bank, and they give you different profiles of risk and return. which I think also just shows that you can do a number of different things with it within a similar asset class, right? So looking at real assets. But there's also something that you said, I just want to highlight, that it's not all about the money, right? You also have part of your investment is about getting an emotional return because you love to travel, right?
Right. Right.
Okay.
I did a video episode about alternate investing, and I did it from a place in Mexico that because we made this investment in a company called Third Home, we have access to these luxury locations all over the world. And so I did this video from a 4-bedroom, 6,000 square foot suite in Mexico that I stayed at for like under $1,000 for a week. So I don't have, and actually I'm going to offer for your listeners, we'll put a link in here because there is a way to do this without being an investor or having a luxury home and it's not a timeshare. So I'd love to share that with your traveling audience. But yeah, I think an investment for me, an investment has to pay me cash or it has to give me something that I need anyway, whether that's education, or something that I really want in my life. And travel is certainly, something that I love to do.
I'm also a very big fan of travel. I think we've talked about that.
All people in Europe are, yes.
Yeah. So hey, speaking of which, so I know that you had an opportunity to live overseas, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm always curious. I know you lived in Russia, and which in an amazing city that I visited back in the mid-90s, something like that. But I'm interested to know from your perspective, like how that experience living overseas is actually benefiting you in the people that you're working with, your team, your investors. How did that international experience help you in what you're doing today, add more value to other people?
I lived in Russia while it was still communist. So I was there studying as a student. I was there for about 5 months. And so that was a long time ago. But I think universally what it taught me, I went to school in San Francisco and I was a liberal college kid and all those things, but I knew at my heart that I was a capitalist and I knew that I was also a patriot. So when I went to Russia, it underscored just experiencing a true communist society and what that looks like and what it does to the people. And communism as a core is an equal opportunity to poverty. That's what it is. It doesn't take away from socialist programs, which can benefit whole communities. But at the time, living in a country where everybody that I knew, and I'm still friends with my Russian friends to this day, many of them have emigrated to the United States, having an experience with folks that had grown up in an environment where it doesn't matter how hard you work, you're not going to do better than the person next to you who's not working hard at all. And that is not for me. So it solidified, my card-carrying capitalist identity. And, it was an incredible lesson that I carry through to today.
And I a lot of times when you can get those lessons and that are still with you even to this day, right? A lot of times people think, well, it's about all the things that I want, the experiences that you go through in life. Many times it's about being able to recognize the things that you don't want in your life, right? And so I think it's, it's Robert Kiyosaki, right? That says there's 3 sides to every coin. So you kind of look either one and you look on the edge and figure out what you want for yourself, for your life, for your family. And so that's just another example of having had that. So another thing, so you've also had the opportunity. I know you've worked in sales, and we speak to a lot of people that are in the sales environment here, and some part of I think one of the best professions, if not the best profession ever invented, I guess. And I'm curious also too, like as you think about the sales experience that you had, right, and that you still carry today, how is that helping you in your interactions with your investors?
Yeah, sales is everything. So I got when I started into sales, I didn't want to go into sales because I thought, oh, it's smarmy. But I had a totally different mindset. I had a really, poverty mindset. and I didn't understand. But sales is the only job that you can have other than being a CEO where you have exposure to every level in a business. If you have a big deal on the table, the CEO, no matter how big the company, is interested in you. And you have access to all of the workings of the organization. You will do the same at the organizations that you're selling to. You're selling, especially once you're up in the C-suite and selling. So my sales career, I was very grateful to, because it gave me the money to survive the financial downfalls that I had. And it gave me the freedom to be with my kids. I was a full-time single mom. I had full custody. And I didn't say this before, but I'll say it now. My financial mistakes, the reason I ended up in that situation twice was because I was sued 25 times in 10 years by my ex-husband. Now, I don't think it really matters how I got there, but some people overspend, they just spend beyond their means. That wasn't the case with me, but it doesn't matter. It's how I got there. And it's a career that it's the only career that it doesn't matter what gender you are, what race you are. All that matters is how you perform. And I'd rather be measured on my performance than anything else. So that is tantamount to my life. And in this business here, as I'm building my team, like you've done, the one thing I don't need help with, I do not need help selling. And that would be a very expensive item to hire someone if I didn't know how to sell, how to network, how to make it rain.
Yeah. And that is really, really important. And part of the reason of asking that question, right, is a lot of times people are focused on the sales aspect and being able to bring in the capital, all those things that you talked about. And it goes back to also one of the things you talked about before. It's not always just about the money. And just understanding that sales process when you're interacting with prospective investors, for instance, what is having had that experience and understanding how to interact with, a new prospective client, like having that previous sales experience, how does that, you believe, help you engage with the person that you have in front of you?
Well, in the system that I'm setting up now, I'm not, investors are coming to me, but I'm not taking investors, but I am the investor, going to other, whether it's joint venture or syndication, et cetera. I think the skill it has given me is, can I swear on this episode?
As long as you keep it light.
Okay.
If not, we'll worry about it. Go
swearing
ahead.
It's my drug of choice. Yeah.
Just go.
Like sales has taught me, like, my ability to tolerate bullshit is zero. And so it's very easy for me to get the feeling that I can trust or not trust you, which is part of it. But my gut, you can't just go on your gut. My gut has been wrong in the past. I'm unafraid to ask questions. I'm unafraid to ask for anything I want, whether that's, a higher position or more equity or whatever it is that we're talking about, unafraid to negotiate. And as a whole, women tend to not ask for what they need as a whole. That's in all parts of their lives. So that alone is something that I learned in sales. And it's probably the strongest muscle I have right now, is my ability to ask for things.
So I think that is fantastic in those interactions, right? Either you're looking at prospective investors or customers, or you are that prospective investor. So those are the types of skills that I think are invaluable for anyone. So thanks for sharing that. There's also another point of, you've mentioned being successful in sales. You've had lots and lots of accolades. At the same time, you got to a certain point, Jennifer, where you realized, like, you didn't just want to keep working for big companies, and you had to make the decision to kind of pivot and leave that security, or leave that, whatever you want to call it. Can you talk us through some of what that felt like, what that emotion was like when you made that decision, and kind of what drove you to that point that it was time to do something else? Yeah.
I have an episode called The 1 Year Mark. And the day that I decided to leave my corporate job, I recorded, I had no idea I was going to be doing a podcast in the future, but I recorded a memo on my phone that just was me walking through what and why and what I was feeling. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Again, I'm not a huge risk taker. And I had built, what I had done was created 3 short-term rental properties here in Nashville, Tennessee. And the tourism industry had exploded. These properties were performing, phenomenally. And I had promised myself that once, I always keep numbers in my head, and I knew what the numbers were that I had to have to be comfortable enough to try something different. I knew there wouldn't be room for something else in my life if I didn't leave my corporate job, because it takes 60, 70, 80 hours a week, plus you're traveling. So I decided that once those houses were kicking off, cash flowing $60,000 a year, that I would quit the job. I made myself that promise. Now, in the United States, the only other concern is health insurance. My children are grown, so I didn't have that obligation anymore. And I had been single for 20 years, but I had recently married. So I don't want it to make it sound like I just jumped off and got my own health insurance, because it's a big consideration. But I'm able to be insured with my husband, which is good. But that recording, I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified, but I'm also absolutely miserable. I was good at what I did and I hated it. I stayed for 3 reasons: the money, the money, the money. That's it. And so I quit that job on November 28th, 2018. And right after that, for the 3 months following, for the first time in 4 years, all 3 properties sat empty. Yeah. At a drain of $7,000 a month. So I'm sweating bullets, because that was my carrying cost, $7,000 a month. I'm sweating bullets. And here in Nashville, it's Music City. It's also a healthcare technology hub, but there are a lot of Grammy Award winning musicians. So I have a friend who said to me, "Oh, that's just the universe testing you." And I said, "Well, the universe can kiss my butt, because I've been tested. I don't need to be tested anymore." But what it did, the short answer to your question is that I was terrified, but I did it anyway, because I promised myself, and because I had abandoned myself over and over and over again. And I say this to people all the time. I have to remind myself all the time, don't abandon yourself. But it also, another part of my investment strategy is, once an asset starts to underperform to what I'm comfortable with, I am quick to let it go. I am quick to get out and move on. My husband is the type of investor, he'll hold on. So short-term rental is a great example. That year, 2019, those properties did not perform as well as they had before. And I decided, first I unloaded the one that was a really poor performer immediately in 19. And then I unloaded the other 2 in February of 2020, 30 days before COVID hit. So I'm very fortunate in that. But it really was because I was looking at it going, this is not, there are easier ways to make money than short-term rental.
Sorry to interrupt, but how did you know that it was not performing against what standard? Because I think a lot of times people just hold on to properties because they're still making money and but you hit on something here, which is they weren't performing against what?
Well, performing against the numbers that they had been performing against, watching the competition. So here in Nashville, the tourist industry exploded. And once people started to understand what Airbnb was, there are investors coming in, building buildings with rooftop pools and fireplaces. And I can't compete with my little houses on those where they had been, performing. They were still doing much better than a long-term rental. Okay. But also, the other shift was Nashville was putting in a lot of regulation. And part of why I like being an entrepreneur, a podcaster, an investor, is because I don't like to be told what to do. So the city kept putting regulation after regulation after regulation. And I just was like, I didn't get into this for that. I got into this because it's my asset. And being a true American, I'm like, you're not going to tell me what to do. So that was it. It was still performing better than a long term. And when COVID hit, I watched, and I'm still watching folks who are still in that industry. It will come back. Short-term rental is not going anywhere. It has shifted our economy entirely. But I watched people hang on, and not pivot. And across the board, those are those are the businesses that are suffering the most, the ones that didn't go, something has radically changed, let's pivot, even if we have to go back to what we were doing before. But that's universally true over here in the States.
Okay. And that's also helpful. Gives us an idea in terms of when it was underperforming, kind of against what was going on there, and you having that ability to adapt and move quickly is something that can give you a major advantage. I'm also, because we've kind of talked around it a little bit and you've mentioned it. I know that you are also really big into going out, sharing your experience, helping other people in their journey. So tell us a little bit about what you are doing over at Micro Empires, and who are the people that you are typically helping, and when you're engaging with them, what does that look like? What does that feel like as well?
Yeah. The Micro Empires, every single show, I want you to be able to walk away with something that you could do that day. And I really focus on I wouldn't say like the average person, because what's average? I don't know what average is, but I really focus on giving tactical steps that you can take that day. Part of moving into investing or entrepreneurship or anything else is the overwhelming size of what it seems like to you. And you don't have to start that way. You could start with micro risks, micro information, micro investing. Everything can be done in small chunks. And I couldn't take big risks because I had children to think of. I couldn't put it all on the line. That wasn't the advice for me. I wasn't going to go like, quit your job and jump off the bridge and follow your dreams. I'm like, yeah, well, my dreams are to be spoon-fed for the rest of my life. But that's not happening. So that is the goal. And I have people who pitch to be a guest on my show, and they're very, very successful. And that's wonderful. But if they can't boil it down to what anybody can do, then they're not a good fit for my show. And so I always need them to reach back into their roots. I mean, I'd love Gary Vaynerchuk to be on my show, or Tony Robbins. But what I'm really interested in is the little steps they took in the beginning, because that's where most of us are. And most of us are there who, whether you're making 40,000 or 400,000, that's the American truth. So,
no, that's and I would even take it a bit more global. I think it's a global truth, which is great, and it's also one of the great ways that you're giving back, that you're helping others to understand really those actionable steps, because that's what makes the biggest impact on our lives individually. So, I guess there's a certain point where I just want to keep talking to you forever. I want to keep asking you things and talking about your life and all the things that you're doing. And you know what, there's always the opportunity to come back. Right. So that's the cool thing. But I do want to ask one last question before we go into the going long final 3. Mm-hmm. And you're like an open book. It feels great being able to speak to you. And I'm just curious, because you mentioned also having children, you're in a demanding corporate job, you knew it was time for you to do something else, so you wanted to pivot. And I'd really love for you to help us understand what role humility has played in your life to allow you to get to where you are.
Oh my God. That is such a good question, by the way. Well done. I think humility is huge. I think, coming to my sister and having no place to live, and she and her family taking us in for 4 months until I could find a job, was humility. Calling people up and asking them, I need a job like now, was humility. But also when I decided to once I, had a home and had an income, had a good income, and was doing really well as a salesperson, I wanted to get into investing. I knew real estate would be a piece of it. I knew that. So I joined a real estate investor group, and I'll never forget, I walked in, and mostly men, big group here in Nashville, great group. And they were speaking a language I'd never heard of. Self-directed IRA, 1031 exchanges, syndication, joint ventures, none of those words did I understand. And people would ask me, well, what are you doing? Are you a buy and hold? Are you new build? Are you a developer? I'm like, I don't know what I am. What are you doing? Do you do hard money? What's that? I don't know. And I'm going to show something to your listeners for those that are watching. One of the things that I did was I had a card.
And by the way, if you're not watching, before she says this, you should move over to the video version and watch what she's getting ready to show. I don't even know this. So I'm excited.
So exciting. And, so humility was, I am not afraid to ask questions. Probably one of the best compliments I got was from a 26-year-old multi-million-dollar CEO who said to me, I've never met someone your age, which I didn't punch him in the face for that comment. But he said, I've never met someone your age who's so as curious and wants to hear from someone my age. And I thought, curiosity has kept me young, but it was the humility to go in and go, I have no idea what anybody's talking about, and I'm here to learn. But the second time I went back, I brought this with me. It's a little business card, and it just says this. And on the back, I knew enough to say, here's my title, was Investor, Entrepreneur, Artist. And that's it. So that I had something, because I also believe it's not really fake it till you make it, but it is kind of like act as if. So I showed up and I was like, I own a piece of property, therefore I'm an investor. But yeah, humility is a huge part of my life every single day.
Okay. Awesome. And thanks for sharing that story. Pretty awesome business card there, by the way.
Thank you. I love it.
Very cool. So, and I'm not going to even describe it because people should go over and watch the video version so you can check out what it looks like. Wow. That's awesome.
Very simple. Very simple.
It is. Very, very cool. Very cool. Jennifer, I guess this is we need to get to the going long final three. And so the thing is, I never ask the question unless you tell me that you're ready for me to ask you the going long final three. Are you ready?
Lay it on me. I'm ready.
I knew you were ready. You're born ready. So it's awesome. Here we go. So the first question of the going long final three is, we started over on that side of the pond. I want to bring it back this way to Europe because that's where I live. And I would love to know, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited or is still on your bucket list to visit?
There's a million on my bucket list. So I will say, we went to Portugal just before everything shut down, and we spent a lot of time in Lisbon, which I loved, but I want to say Porto.
Oh, very nice. God,
I love that city.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
Because I'm a redhead, so it's like the sun is overrated. So it's a little colder up there, and we stay in our turtlenecks a little longer. So
very cool.
That's my favorite. I love it.
That's the first vote for Porto. So Porto, which is awesome. Okay, so we'll take that. Thank you very much. We'll include that in the show notes. The second question has to do with, like I say, all really successful people have only made literally one. Maybe a couple more than one mistakes or learning opportunities or whatever you want to call them. And since you're a successful person, I really would love for you to share, I guess more than dwell on the mistake or the learning opportunity. Really, what was the lesson that you learned that you would kind of pay forward to us so that maybe somebody doesn't make the exact same mistake that you did?
Right. Well, first of all, I would say I make mistakes all the time. So I'm not a person who says, "Oh, I've only made a couple of mistakes." Yeah,
me too.
I'm a mistake machine, man. That's kind of what I do. I eat them for breakfast. My advice is never, ever, ever, ever turn your financial well-being over to another human being at all. Not your husband, not your wife, not even. And I'm not saying financial advisors are bad or anything, but don't show up and just be like, "Here you go, you manage it." You have to be involved and you must take control. And this is part of the thing. Even if all you have is $5,000, it's yours and therefore it's an empire. So that's how I felt. I'm like, yes, you're going to spend a lot of time with me. So, and that is exactly how I got into that situation twice. I turned my financial well-being over to someone else and let it go. And that'll never happen again.
So don't do that. Words of wisdom. And then lastly, talking about wisdom. So what book would you recommend to the Going Long audience?
Well, I know you get a lot of real estate books, which are great. But I think, especially because of your audience, the book that changed my life the most was The 4-Hour Workweek, which I read when it first came out. That changed my attitude. And you know what? My dad had passed away and he had done the usual work, retired at 65. 6 months later, he was gone. And so the biggest lesson I got out of that was don't wait for your retirement, take it now, which Europeans have a much better take on that because they take vacations, et cetera. But it did teach me to shift. And I also, that's probably when I was like, I don't want to climb a corporate ladder. I want my own ladder. So it changed my life.
Okay, the 4-hour work week. So we'll definitely include that in the show notes as well. And so I guess, listen, so we've been chatting for a while, and you have been very, very gracious with your stories, with your time. You shared with us, being able to kind of go through the same situation twice.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about being able to, hustle things through, put in grit and hard work, and being focused on what it is that you wanted to do. When you ran into challenges, well, you pivoted. You didn't just wait forever. You realized that having responsibility for your own financial life is something that is up to you, and you're helping other people to make it up to them. It's not about the macro, although that's something that's important. What affects each and every one of us and what affects you is what's happening micro, right? And you're helping people to understand how they can build their own micro empires. And I know that through the different stories that you've shared, through all of the different things that you are helping us, there are so many people that are like, Jennifer, I need to talk to you. Like, I've got to talk to you. I got to connect with you. How's that going to happen? So what I would love for you to do, Jennifer, is share with the Going Long audience, what is the best way to contact you and or your team?
My website's probably easy. So it's micro-empires.com. And on there, I have a book. It's a free book called How to Pivot and Thrive. It's a system that I've used always. And you can download that book. It's free. There's no obligation, nothing. You can read through it and fill it out. It's really a booklet. It's not very long. Or you can there's a form. You can fill out a form and I'll get it and I'll respond, and you can book time to talk with me. But of course, on all the socials, either Micro Empires or Jennifer Grimson. Okay,
perfect. So you make that really easy. So I'm just going to repeat that, and I'm going to just remind everybody that's part of the Going Long audience, go ahead and go over to the following website, micro-empires.com. She made it really simple. You can go around, lots of information, podcasts, resources, as she mentioned as well. Leave your name, leave your email address, and you'll be able to connect with Jennifer Grimson. So, Jennifer.
And subscribe and review.
Subscribe and review, yeah.
Before we go, I think we have to take a moment to identify how you and I met.
Oh, you that's so funny. I was just getting ready to say, it's really, was getting ready to say this. Yes, so he will hear it. So we'd like to throw this shout out to Mr. Eric Shaver for making a connection here. And so we appreciate that. That was really funny. I was literally just getting ready to say.
You know what? I met Eric. I just want to say this. So I met Eric in Boston at a startup. And it has to have been, I don't even remember. Well, it was when 9/11 happened. So it was 2001. So 20 years ago. And that's just a testimony to how important your network is, and keep your network going. I haven't laid eyes on that man in 20 years, but we still keep in touch. Yeah. So keep the network going. And then I get to meet amazing people like you.
Yeah, definitely. So with that was really funny. I was literally getting ready to say that. So thanks, E, for making that happen. And listen, Jennifer, you've shared so much goodness. I really want to thank you for taking the time to invest with me in this conversation today, and the entire Going Long audience. It's been awesome. So thank you very much for the time.
It's been really fun. I really appreciate it. I love talking to you, and we never have enough time. So I really love it.
Never. Cool. So, and listen, to the Going Long audience, I want to thank you once again for investing your time with Jennifer and I today. Listen, Jennifer left so much goodness here. She's given you very micro actionable steps that you can take so that you can start to move your life in the direction that you really want it to be in. And, I know that both Jennifer and I would love for you to let us know what you think. Like, what parts of the conversation did you like? What would you love for her to come back and talk to us more about in the future? And when you're leaving those reviews, let us know. Like, we really want to know. And if you want to make them a 5-star review, we'll take those as well. So we're open to those. And I guess share this episode with 2 or 3 other people. You can make a positive impact on their lives, and you'll be that person that was responsible. Just like we were just talking about, Eric connected the 2 of us. And so, hey, listen, it's another great way to connect people. And so until I get the opportunity to welcome you back to the next conversation, I just want to say thank you very much, and go out and make it a great day. Wow. Don't you love hearing from top-notch experts in the field? When I was getting started, I really wish that I would have had access to such experts. And even more, I wish they would have given me like a really simple list of things to follow so that I could have gotten to my goals much faster and been much happier even sooner. So that's why I've created for you the 7 things that you should avoid in order to be successful in long distance investing. And you can pick that up really easily by going to billykeels.com/7 things to avoid. And also, if you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our very next episode, so go out and make it a great day.